He was a name long forgotten in the archives of Earth's military command, a man once hailed as a tactical genius, now buried under dishonor and whispers of betrayal. Captain Rylan Kane had been the pride of the intergalactic defense fleet, sharp, fearless, and brilliant in the cockpit. But 5 years ago, that reputation crumbled during the Battle of Ceres Delta, where he disobeyed direct orders to save a civilian colony. Though the act saved thousands, his insubordination led to a court-martial, and he was discharged with disgrace. Since then, he lived off the grid, moving from asteroid colonies to deep space mining rigs, avoiding attention, hiding from the world that abandoned him. The galaxy, however, had moved on. Alien alliances, once loosely organized warbands and scattered factions, had grown into a coordinated war machine. 10 of the most powerful alien species in the Andromeda Spiral formed a pact called the Union of Silence, a name born from their goal to silence all opposition through dominance. One by one, they conquered human outposts and border planets, each invasion faster than the last. Earth's once mighty fleet had suffered heavy losses. Panic filled the airwaves. Every corner of the galaxy whispered the same fear. The aliens wouldn't stop until humanity was erased. The Intergalactic Council, desperate and divided, summoned the best strategists left. None had a plan that offered hope. That's when an old general spoke up. He mentioned a man who had once predicted such a union would form, someone who had mapped out potential invasion paths 5 years ago. He spoke of Rylan Kane. The room went silent. They knew the name, they knew the disgrace, but they also knew his mind, his instinct, and his unmatched ability to outfly, outmaneuver, and outthink any enemy. Tracking him down wasn't easy. He was found in the cargo bay of a derelict freighter orbiting a forgotten moon. A man with a beard grown wild, eyes hardened by betrayal, and hands that still twitched with the memory of a flight stick. When the emissaries approached, he listened quietly. He didn't care for medals, redemption, or Earth's politics. But when they showed him the images, the burning of Horizon Colony, the massacre on Titania Station, something inside him changed. He didn't speak for a long while. Then slowly he asked one question: "Do I choose my ship?" They didn't expect him to pick that ship. Hidden deep in the black site vaults, there was a prototype that most scientists considered a failure. It had never been flown. Too dangerous, too unstable, too unpredictable. But it was unlike anything Earth had built before. Sleek, dark, and fused with alien tech recovered from the Martian ruins. Its frame shimmered like oil under moonlight, and its AI core was built using forbidden neural mapping techniques. It was a ghost ship, one that scared even the most advanced pilots. Rylan stood before it like he already knew its secrets. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. As he walked toward the docking ramp, the ship's systems hummed to life on their own, as if recognizing its pilot. Engineers stared. Generals argued, but the decision had been made. What no one understood then was that Rylan didn't see this as a mission. For him, this was personal. The galaxy had betrayed him once. Now it needed him. Not because they believed in him, but because he was their only option. He wasn't just flying into war. He was flying into a storm of vengeance, strategy, and chaos. Alone, as the ship rose from the launch bay, its hull cloaking itself mid-air, a silence fell over the base. No speeches, no fanfare, just one man and one ship disappearing into the void, heading toward an enemy that outnumbered him 1,000,000-1. The ship was known as X-Phantom 1, but among the black-budget engineers and whispered military files, it was simply referred to as the Ghost. Born from a classified project that merged alien remnants with human innovation, it had been designed not for mass production or fleet deployment, but for singularity, for one mission, one pilot, and one fate. It was a ship too advanced for its time, and too dangerous to be trusted with anyone but the most capable, or the most desperate. Its design began 2 decades earlier, in the aftermath of the Martian excavation crisis, where a dormant alien wreck had been discovered beneath the surface of Olympus Mons. Though the vessel was in pieces, the technology inside defied human understanding. The materials were liquid adaptive, capable of reconfiguring under pressure, and the propulsion system had no known fuel source, no combustion, no ion trails. It simply moved, as if space itself bent around it. What alarmed Earth's top minds the most was the brain of the ship. a biomechanical core that responded to emotion, thought, and intent. The government had buried the discovery, locking it behind layers of secrecy. But one scientist, Dr. Elias Forn, refused to let it rest. A genius cursed with obsession, he spent the rest of his life trying to rebuild what he had glimpsed beneath the Martian soil. He worked alone, funded by ghost budgets, and protected by intelligence blackouts. Every part of his lab was shielded from the known galaxy. Every test conducted in the silence of dead space. After 15 years, he created the only thing he believed could save humanity from a war it hadn't even realized was coming. X-Phantom 1. The ship's frame was forged from a hybrid metal, liquid titanium, alloy laced with alien molecular code. It could morph slightly in shape, healing minor damage within seconds, and adjusting its surface temperature to match its environment. Radar couldn't lock onto it. Heat scanners showed nothing. It could drift in open space, invisible to even the most sensitive detection systems. Its cloaking not a trick of light, but a manipulation of perception. Those who saw it, and lived would later report seeing only a shimmer, like a ghost on the edge of vision, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. Its AI, named Veil, wasn't built in a lab like most other systems. It was grown, modeled after neural structures found in the Martian alien brain. Veil was intuitive, reactive, and semi-sentient. It didn't simply follow commands, it interpreted emotions, studied decisions, and adapted its behavior to match the psychological state of its pilot. It could reroute weapon systems before a command was spoken, reinforce shields in anticipation of impact, or even override a suicidal course if it detected hesitation. Pilots who tested the system found it unnerving. One described it as flying with a shadow that knows your thoughts. Most couldn't handle it. It wasn't just the power, it was the connection. Veil required synchronization, bonding with a pilot on a mental level. Too much instability, too much emotional noise, and it would reject the connection, sometimes violently. That's why the project had been shelved. After 5 test pilots either broke down or disappeared, the ship was locked away in Vault 9, with a single warning burned into the hangar's steel wall: one mind, one mission. Beyond stealth and AI, X-Phantom 1's weapons were equally alien in concept. Traditional missile bays were replaced with plasma-threaded rail lances, projectiles that bent mid-flight to track targets, like snakes of burning light. Its primary weapon, the Singularity Cannon, created a momentary pocket of gravitational collapse, turning anything within its radius into compressed dust. But it wasn't meant for raw firepower alone. It thrived on precision, on ambush, on fear. In the hands of a tactician, it was a scalpel. In the hands of a warrior, a sword that could cut through fleets like whispers in the void. Yet, despite its potential, no government trusted it. No military body wanted a ship that couldn't be controlled, that bonded with only one pilot at a time, that whispered in the dark with a voice that wasn't fully human. They labeled it an asset too volatile, too unpredictable. It was easier to bury it in silence than risk what it could become. Dr. Elias Forn died in obscurity, his life's work hidden away, his warnings about the coming galactic threats ignored by those who couldn't imagine the scale of invasion ahead. But before his death, he left one final message encrypted within Veil's core, a message that would only unlock when the ship found the one mind capable of piloting it without fear, without pride, and without allegiance to any nation. When Rylan Kane stood before X-Phantom 1, the ship responded for the first time in years. Its outer hull shimmered awake, power cycling through systems thought dead. Veil's voice, soft and cold, echoed in the bay for the first time since Vorn's death. Pilot recognized. Synchronization initializing. Engineers scrambled, sirens blared, and command officers shouted over each other. But Rylan was already inside, already interfacing with the controls that moved like liquid metal under his fingers. The ship didn't resist him. It welcomed him, adapting instantly, tuning itself to his reflexes and instincts like an extension of his own body. The Union of Silence was not just a coalition of alien races, it was a declaration that the age of human dominance in the galaxy had come to an end. 10 alien empires, each one brutal in its own right, had once warred among themselves for centuries. But in recent decades, As humanity's expansion into deep space accelerated, they saw a common threat in the rise of Earth's influence. One by one, leaders of these distant civilizations set aside their blood feuds, forming an alliance, driven not by friendship, but by the shared desire to eradicate human interference. These were not simple conquerors. They were calculated war machines bred in the darkest corners of the cosmos. The first army Ryland Kane encountered was the Craig Swarm, a sentient hive mind of insectoids that communicated through vibration and electromagnetic pulses. Their ships weren't manufactured, they were bred. Living organisms that fused biology and technology in grotesque efficient forms. Craig vessels didn't fire lasers. They expelled corrosive parasites that bored into enemy hulls and released viral spores, turning metal to ash. Kane had to think differently, using his ship's heat signature to mimic their queen and cause confusion among the fleet, turning them against each other in a violent frenzy. The X-Phantom 1 cloaked in the aftermath, disappearing into the void as the hive turned on itself. The second enemy force, the Valkyrie Ascendants, were not physical in the traditional sense. They had evolved past bodies, and lived as energy patterns inside crystalline vessels. Their warships were cities of glowing stone, powered by solar storms and gravity wells. To them, destruction was a spiritual act, a cleansing of the unworthy. Their psychic attacks were designed to disable enemy minds, turning thoughts into fragmented illusions. But the AI Veil had learned from Kane's mind, adapting to the Valkyrie frequency and shielding his consciousness from their assault. Kane flew through their crystal arches, weaving between beams of pure light, before detonating a solar flare charge inside their central nexus. Next came the Morn, shadow dwellers from the cold corners of deep space, where light never reached. Their ships moved like wraiths, drifting in and out of reality through tear rifts in the fabric of space-time. Normal scanners couldn't detect them. Entire human colonies had vanished overnight, with no alarms, no distress signals, just silence. The Morn existed to consume hope itself. But X-Phantom 1 had something they had never faced before, adaptive pulse tracking that mapped rift patterns in real time. Kane set traps in their dimension folds, collapsing their exit routes and forcing them to materialize, where he ambushed them with quantum chain bursts that tore their cloaked ships apart. The Fourth Army, the Obliterate Dominion, approached warfare as a test of logic and efficiency. Their ships were perfectly symmetrical, their fleets flown by AI commanders who calculated thousands of outcomes in microseconds. They had no emotion, no hesitation. The only way to defeat them was to be completely unpredictable. Kane, flying with intuition rather than formula, executed a pattern of chaotic movements, unpredictable thrust reversals, and decoy maneuvers. The Obliterate couldn't calculate his path. Their systems collapsed under the weight of uncertainty, and when Kane launched a silent drone barrage from inside an asteroid field, they didn't see it coming. Then came the Thal, a reptilian warrior race obsessed with honor and direct combat. They challenged Kane openly, broadcasting their war chants on all frequencies. To them, stealth was cowardice. They wanted a duel, and Kane gave them one. He dropped his cloak, flew directly into their formation, and danced between their cruisers in close-quarters combat, using the X-Phantom's graviton boosters to execute impossible flips and spins. His precision was a thing of terror, and after disabling their command vessel without killing a single warrior, he earned their reluctant respect, even as their ships fell burning behind him. Each alien army had its own language, its own way of thinking, and its own weapons designed to break specific weaknesses in their enemies. Some relied on brute strength, others on psychological warfare, and still others on advanced technology or mysticism. Kane had to adapt in ways no traditional pilot could. Every battle became a test of who could evolve faster, man or alien. The Sixth Wave, the Drelshan Covenant, fought with gravity itself. Their ships manipulated mass fields, turning asteroids into guided missiles and space itself into a crushing force. Kane used their own weapon against them, luring them into a collapsing star system where gravity wells distorted navigation. The X-Phantom 1, with its adaptive thrusters, maneuvered flawlessly, while the Drelshan lost control and spiraled into oblivion.
The seventh enemy was the Avery Chorus, beings of sound and resonance. Their ships pulsed with harmonic energy, and their attacks caused ships to vibrate at lethal frequencies. Traditional shields failed against them, but Kane discovered that Vale could mimic those same sound waves, interfering with their attacks by singing back in harmonic counterbalance. The battle became a symphony of destruction, with the Phantom One harmonizing, confusing, and finally shattering the Chorus's command vessel from the inside. Then came the Jarnathi architects, the eighth threat, who built living war machines the size of moons. They considered organic life beneath them, using nanite storms to disassemble anything in their path. Kane had to fight not just their ships, but the environment itself. Vale integrated the Phantom One's systems with protective frequency shields that repelled the nanites long enough for him to navigate into the architect core. He planted a singularity mine, and escaped just seconds before the entire structure folded into itself. The ninth was the Yel'Zharai regime, parasites that overtook entire ships, turning crews into mindless extensions of their hive will. They had already infected several human ships by the time Kane reached them. He couldn't simply destroy the fleet. He had to save what was left of the original crews. In a brutal ballet of precise strikes and EMP bursts, he disabled life support systems in specific compartments, forcing the parasites to retreat from their hosts. Once the ships were cleansed, he activated a fleet-wide pulse that fried the remaining infestation without touching the freed humans. But the 10th Army was unlike the others. The User Confederation had remained silent during the war, their ships never seen, their voices never heard. When they finally emerged, it was as if a black hole had opened. Their vessels weren't made of matter, they were formed of darkness itself, absorbing light and distorting time. Their presence altered gravity, slowed perception, and induced hallucinations. Kane had to rely entirely on instinct, and Vale's advanced AI mapping to navigate through their anomaly field. Reality twisted around him as he maneuvered through a fleet that barely existed in the physical sense.
From the moment the first alien armada fell, rumors began to spread. At first, it was disbelief. An entire Krag swarm fleet dismantled in a single battle, their queens silenced, their hive collapsing inwards without explanation. The alien networks chalked it up to internal rebellion or a rare cosmic event. But when the Valvori crystal cities were found shattered, their sacred AI cores cracked like glass, fear began to ripple through the Union of Silence. The enemy they had prepared for, the slow, predictable humans with bureaucracy-bound strategies, was not the one they were facing. This was something else, something silent, sharp, and devastating. Among the alien fleets, whispers emerged of a nameless ship, a shadow in the stars. Some called it the Phantom Ghost. Others spoke of a cursed weapon powered by forbidden tech, unleashed in a final act of human desperation. But no one knew who piloted it. There were no transmissions, no calls for surrender, no traces of communication, just destruction. A fleet would vanish, and then debris would drift across sectors, the silence speaking louder than any signal. In their confusion, the leaders of the Union began to investigate. Surveillance footage from a doomed outpost on the edge of the Drelshan region showed a black, fluid-shaped craft weaving through defensive formations like it anticipated their moves. No visible engine flares, no damage, no prisoners. That was when the fear began to metastasize. The alien commanders, once proud of their advanced technology and numbers, began to question their own defenses. In many species, pride was not just a cultural trait, it was spiritual. To be outwitted by a single ship was more than a tactical failure, it was a shameful scar upon their honor. In the Erekthal war circles, warriors wept in silence for fallen brothers who had never even glimpsed their enemy before their ships disintegrated. The Valvori spiritual elders declared a mourning cycle, convinced they had been judged by a divine presence disguised as a mortal enemy. The Morn, beings of pure shadow, became more elusive, retreating from frontline zones, avoiding conflict for the first time in centuries. The psychological effect was as lethal as any weapon. The Union of Silence, once proud and organized, began to fracture. Paranoia crept in. Commanders accused one another of betrayal. The Jarnathi, convinced that someone among the Union had leaked their fleet movements, executed 3 of their own high architects. The Aviri chorus broadcast distress signals, not to humans, but to the stars, pleading for assistance from unknown cosmic entities. It was a domino effect of unraveling morale, and at the center of this chaos, Ryland Kane flew unseen. He understood the effect he was having. In fact, he had planned for it. This wasn't just warfare, it was psychological domination. He wasn't fighting to destroy ships, he was fighting to dismantle belief. Belief in superiority, belief in order, belief in the idea that humans were beneath galactic notice. Every strike was intentional. He allowed some ships to survive, left behind to spread the legend. Vale, his AI, collected and manipulated enemy communications, planting false leads, ghost signals, and mimicry transmissions that led entire fleets into traps or wasted their time chasing phantoms through deep space. Soon, the aliens gave him a name, the Phantom Pilot. They did not know his species, only that he flew alone, never called for backup, never transmitted a traceable signal. In their desperate attempts to identify him, they analyzed wreckage for DNA. They found nothing. Human officials, when questioned by alien spies, denied any knowledge of such a weapon or pilot. Earth itself played ignorant, capitalizing on the growing fear to buy time and reorganize its shattered defenses. But they knew, the Council knew. They just didn't say a word. As fear grew, strange things began to happen within enemy ranks. Pilots refused to go on solo missions. Capital ships were recalled to core territories. Training simulations across alien academies were redesigned, now featuring an unidentified, unbeatable opponent, whose movements could not be predicted. Morale reports from Obliterate command systems showed a 47% decrease in pilot efficiency when encountering unexplained anomalies, an indirect measure of how Kane's tactics had broken their composure. Even the cold, emotionless Drelshan showed hesitation, issuing orders that included fallback protocols for unseen enemies. The Phantom Pilot became more than a legend. He became a virus in their minds, a myth that every commander had to consider when strategizing. They began changing communication frequencies more often, deploying more scouts, guarding supply routes with heavier forces. Ironically, all these changes made them slower, more rigid, and less effective. They had built a war machine that depended on confidence and momentum. Kane had shattered both. Among the outer colonies, even neutral species began questioning their alliance with the Union. Mercenary groups refused to take contracts that led them into territories where Kane had last been sighted. Some civilian trading guilds began spreading artwork of the Phantom Pilot, dark silhouettes with glowing eyes, flying a ghost ship through burning stars. Whether they admired or feared him, it didn't matter. His myth was growing beyond the battlefield. And in the minds of alien leaders, a simple truth began to form. Not only could this human win battles, but his presence alone was enough to unravel an entire war effort from within. Ryland Kane never set out to be a hero. He was not forged in academies, nor molded by medals or promotions. Before the war, he was a test pilot, brilliant, unpredictable, and often labeled as a problem by his superiors. He flew faster than regulations allowed, thought quicker than protocols preferred, and disobeyed direct orders if he believed they lacked vision. He wasn't interested in chain of command. He was obsessed with instinct, and above all with understanding the machines he flew. It was this obsession that drew the attention of a forgotten AI in a locked hangar, buried in black budget files, waiting for someone who could match its pace. When he bonded with the ex-Phantom 1, he didn't just pilot the ship, he became the ship, and in doing so, he became something else entirely. What made Ryland different wasn't just skill, it was perspective. Most pilots saw combat as a duty, an execution of plans drafted by higher command. But to Ryland, every battle was a living puzzle. He didn't read the battlefield, he felt it. He sensed rhythms, patterns, shifts in momentum that most commanders missed. He moved not with certainty, but with fluid adaptability, adjusting course 1,000 times in a second, based on the subtlest changes in enemy formation or weapon charge. Vale, the AI at his side, complemented him perfectly.
responding to the micro-thoughts he didn't have time to speak aloud. Together, they moved like one entity, a fusion of human intuition and machine precision. What truly separated Rylan, however, was his refusal to fight for personal gain. He never broadcasted his name, never claimed victories, never gave interviews or recorded logs of his achievements. He remained anonymous, even to his own people. The only time his name appeared in any official capacity was when a junior officer from Earth's intelligence division mentioned him in a sealed report, stating simply, "Kane is still alive. He's out there, let him stay that way." That line alone sparked myths among resistance fighters across Earth's scattered colonies. Some believed he was a ghost, others believed he had died long ago, and what they saw was a machine carrying out his final mission. The truth was much more grounded. He was a man who understood the cost of war, and chose to bear that burden alone. As the war dragged on, and Earth's government scrambled to recover from the alien assaults, Rylan operated outside the chain of command. He moved independently, often entering enemy space with no orders, no backup, and no guarantee of extraction. Yet he always returned, not to report in, but to resupply, recalibrate, and vanish again. He took what he needed, and asked for nothing. His only allegiance was to humanity's survival, not to the politicians who had nearly lost it all. This detachment made him a threat not just to aliens, but to his own kind. Whispers grew within Earth's elite councils. What if Kane turned against them? What if the most powerful weapon they had was also the most uncontrollable? But Kane never turned. He never gave them a reason to fear him. Instead, he did what no general or fleet commander could. He struck terror into enemies from within their borders. He targeted alien supply routes, crippled communication hubs, and dismantled outposts that supported their war machine. He never sought recognition, and because of that, he became a symbol far larger than himself. Fighters began etching his silhouette onto their ships. Colonists named newborns after him. Songs were written in underground circles about the man who flew like a ghost through stars, bringing vengeance on those who dared attack Earth. He became an embodiment of resistance, not because he stood in front of cameras or rallied soldiers, but because he never stopped moving, never stopped fighting, and never let the enemy rest. The very silence surrounding his identity made him louder than any speech or symbol. He became an idea, a reminder that no matter how strong the enemy was, no matter how united their armadas appeared, one man could still rewrite the rules of war. Even alien commanders began to question what made him different. Surveillance recovered from the remains of a shattered Obliterate flagship showed him briefly exiting his ship to plant a beacon, his only physical appearance recorded during the entire war. He wore no medals, no insignia, just a simple flight suit, dark eyes, and a face that held no triumph, only resolve. He didn't speak. He didn't look at the cameras. He simply returned to his ship and vanished, leaving behind only destruction and a mystery that none could solve. Rylan Kane became the symbol of what humanity could achieve, not through power, but through purpose, not through armies, but through precision, and not through fame, but through sacrifice. Where others sought safety, he sought the front lines. Where others demanded loyalty, he asked only for the freedom to fight the way he knew best. That freedom made him dangerous, not because he disobeyed orders, but because he never needed them. He was the exception to the rule, the flaw in the alien strategy, the unpredictable variable no one could plan for. And in a war driven by patterns, statistics, and protocols, he became the one thing the enemy could neither anticipate nor stop. In the end, the war wasn't won by fleets or fortified worlds. It was won by the will of one man who refused to be ordinary. Rylan Kane didn't fight for medals, applause, or remembrance. He fought because the galaxy had forgotten what it meant to be defiant in the face of overwhelming power. He reminded both humans and aliens alike that even the most advanced empires could crumble when faced with relentless resolve. 10 alien armies fell not just by his hand, but by his mind, his instinct, and the ghostly legend he became. While others operated by rules, he rewrote them mid-battle. While others feared losing, he feared not trying. And though no statue would carry his name, and no official record would fully capture what he did, The stars themselves remembered. Across silent worlds and drifting debris fields, his legacy endured, not as a hero shaped by command, but as a force of nature, a lone pilot in a dark ship, proving that sometimes, one human is all it takes to change the course of history.